tonight? Should I react or turn up the light? Looks like you're picking a fight in a blurring wrong and right. But how your mood changes, you're a devil, now an angel, suddenly subtle, somewhat silent as a monk. You only tell me you love me when you're drunk.
Welcome to LGBTQ Live, and today I'm joined in the studio by thespian and playwright Thalia Gonzalez-Kane. Thalia, welcome to LGBTQ Live.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thalia, we will start off at the very beginning. You can tell from your dark complexion that you're probably not a Celt. I gather you come from the beauty of Latina America. Tell us the background to that.
Yeah, so I'm an Ecuadorian Canadian, so my father's from Canada originally, and my mother's from Ecuador, and our whole family lives there. So I moved back and forth a lot as a child, and I'd spend a couple months there, a couple months in Canada, so it was a very confusing upbringing for sure, and figuring out the difference between Spanish and English. It was a bit of a blessing for sure in terms of having that perspective, but I didn't quite understand it at the age of 4 yet.
You were that young?
Yeah. I mean, the first time I was in Ecuador, I would have been about 2 months old.
Everybody would think that you come from Ecuador, on the equator, very warm, but it probably wasn't a massive change when you got to Canada, which we consider quite a cold place. How did you find that transformation from one to the other?
To be honest, I didn't really notice it a whole lot, just because I'd sort of grown up knowing that my whole life. So there wasn't really a difference until I was a little bit older and I realized, oh, these are the clothes I wear in Ecuador, and then when I come to Canada, I wear 5 more scarves.
And different boots. And,
Exactly.
Yeah, because I would have thought that Canada it's probably quite warm in winter, whereas Ecuador, well, I suppose Ecuador is too, but I mean it's very different in terms of climate, isn't it? Because
I mean Canada's very cold, especially the area that I grew up in the East Coast with my folks. We'd have 20 feet of snow, no questions, and cold weather warnings because it was dangerous to go outside. But it definitely becomes more mild during the spring and fall, and then summer in Toronto is 30 degrees.
Yeah. Were you acclimatised to that? Because all my Canadian friends, even the ones I know who come from Vancouver, they also, when the snow comes here, which doesn't happen that often, they love it. You know, it's like it's like we've come home. Whereas we're the quite opposite. You know, we'll sit in and watch it out the window. So what's Miss Miller's feeling for snow, as we say?
Well, I was here for one day of snow a couple months ago, I think, and I was walking and it was raining, and then suddenly it started hailing. Yeah. And then it was snowing, and I did have a moment of teariness.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Well, all I can say, Thalia, is you should have been here about 18 months ago, and my word, you would have been blubbering because we were stuck in the house for 3 days. Yeah. So would you consider yourself bicultural if that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. It is something I'm quite proud of, and that I think as I've grown older, I've started to learn how to appreciate both of them, and appreciate the fact that while I spent most of my teen years living in Canada full time, I grew up in a very Ecuadorian household, and I love that, and I think I was really lucky to be exposed to all of that.
Yeah. When I think in those terms, what I think of is the Ecuadorian side of you would probably be quite Catholic in terms culturally, and the Canadian side would be quite secular. I mean, is that a juggling act?
So my family is actually, on my Canadian side, 3 generations back are from West Cork and Limerick. So I've got Catholic on both sides.
Yeah. Well, we will come to that one when we actually start talking about your play. I'm guessing Catholicism in Canada is quite different from it is in Ecuador.
It is, It's much more subdued.
Yeah. Well, the way I like to put it is, it's probably it's much less superstitious.
Yes.
Yeah. When I think back to South America, I mean in this part of the world, people don't tend to know the authors as much, but South American literature is stunning, isn't it? I mean, who would come to mind with yourself? I mean, to me, I would think 4 or 5 people straight away. Starting, of course, with Gabriel Garcia.
I mean, that's the thing. Lorca is just so... there's something about... And there is something very different in reading the translations in English and reading the text in Spanish. And I think that's one of the things that I probably value the most about having that as a native language, because it's visceral in a different kind of a way that words can't be in English. And that's also a bit of a struggle for me as a writer, because, that juiciness of text.
Well, I was about to use the word passion.
Yes.
I mean, the only one I know who probably isn't as passionate, but my word is probably more imaginative than anybody, is Borges. Jorge Luis. But the one I loved Marquez, but the one I also loved hugely was what's your friend from Peru? Thalia Julia, the Scribidor. It'll come to me. Don't worry about it. And then of course you've got the Isabel Allende's and all of that. Yeah. So you then got to Canada, and now you're suddenly in Ireland. How did that come about? Was it because of what you would say was your generational roots, or was there more to why you came to Ireland?
There was that definitely was a bit of a part of it. I was traveling a few years ago doing my backpacking trip, as one does, and I fell in love with Ireland as soon as I was here, when I sort of did my tour around. Only place I've ever hitchhiked in my life.
Smart move, yeah. Smart move, yeah. Socially, or as we say, environmentally. I mean, Ireland is. I mean, it's a rock on the end of the outskirts of the Atlantic. But I think it's difficult for people like myself who, were raised here to a certain degree to understand the fascination people find socially, because we know the downside of it.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, but so how long ago was that, Thalia?
So that would have been about 3 years ago now.
2015 or 16?
Yeah, 16.
16, okay, so you missed the marriage equality, yeah.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
I was not here for that, but...
We did, well, not only did we change the world in a small way, we changed ourselves in an enormous way, because we took responsibility for our actions, which is, again, is quite an un-Catholic response, isn't it? Were you here you weren't here for the 8th Amendment, were you? Was that?
No, I missed that as well. I just moved here in August.
Yeah, that would have been another anti-Catholic stance that we took as well. So I would say, in many respects, what we've done, I suppose, is a belated version of Canada. I hope we would keep some of the good stuff from Catholicism, but we secularized ourselves and said, we're not going to be, shall we say, conditioned by voodoo.
Yeah,
which is a big stage. So, when you were growing up in Canada and in Ecuador, was literature big in your life, or?
It was. I was a big reader. I didn't even really realize how big of a reader
Voracious,
I was.
as we would say.
Yeah, like I was the girl that fell asleep on her book and would drool on the pages and wake up the next morning.
You don't have to apologise. I live with a couple of them.
And then when I grew up, when I was in high school, I sort of lost touch with reading as much, and it became more of a chore from school and such, and then I fell in love with it again and became a big reader. But it's definitely, my grandmother was a school teacher as well, and my dad was an academic, academic, so literature was always quite encouraged, and it was just nice to escape into those worlds, and it was definitely...
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you, and this is why, to a certain degree, it surprises me, because I keep commenting that your generation doesn't read the printed matter the way my generation did. I mean, I love the printed, I love the feel of print. I mean, I buy 2 newspapers a day, still. But unlike yourself, I mean, where my, if you like, sanctuary came is, yes, it was in the work itself, but because I came from what we would call a working class area, I loved going to libraries. I mean, I could still go into a library and spend an afternoon there and not even take a book out, So it's in many respects, it's a connection with yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this sort of solo time you get to spend, and I'm actually, so part of the reason I came to Ireland was because I'm doing the master's program at UCD in the Gaiety School of Acting right now, and we have the James Joyce Library, what a wonderful place.
Yeah.
It's just getting in there in the morning, sitting for hours and going through the stacks and stacks of incredible literature and these original hard copies that they have.
Is he as respect? I mean, the strange thing is, first of all, when I was growing up here, Ulysses was banned in Dublin.
Really?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I should correct that to a certain degree. My understanding is the hardback version was available, but the paperback version wasn't, on the basis that if you could afford the hardback version, you were probably well enough educated that you wouldn't be corrupted by it. But if you, we keep it away from the
paperback folk.
Yeah, we keep that away from the peasants just in case, they start getting up to any of this stuff. Have you read Ulysses?
I'm ashamed to say I haven't.
Well, no,
I have read Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man.
Yeah.
I'm not totally out of the joys.
Yeah. No, I agree. But that's the starting, it's a stepping stone. I mean, I read about 70 pages of Finnegan's Wake and I thought, oh God, one of those. But I couldn't get any further because I think to a certain degree you need a mentor or a guide or something like that.
Yeah.
Ulysses, I can understand, and I've also seen the movie of it as well when it was made in the 60s. So Ulysses I can grasp because it is about Dublin. It is the quintessential Dublin book. But persevere, that's all I could say. And, and some of the places are still here, And, have you been here for Bloomsday?
I have not, no.
Well, make sure you are here this year. Now, by and large, it does seem to be mainly Americans who come round and they dress and they have the meal. They
Similar
have
to Paddy's.
Exactly. Well, no. They dress like the style of the time.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll see all these Americans going around with straw boaters and colourful blazers and women with long skirts and bonnets and floral brollies and things like that. So once is enough. But if you're still here, then it is worth going to. Yeah. So tell me, and this is I'm very proud of the fact that in Ireland we don't tend to produce some good musicians, not a great deal of visual artists, but we produce great writers, perhaps because of the storytelling tradition. Were you attracted to Irish writing when you were in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, we do work with a lot of Irish playwrights. So I mean, people like Seamus Heaney.
Well, he was a poet.
Yes, but he did write a...
Did he?
Yeah.
Gosh,
There's
apologies. I sincerely apologise.
And, where is it? Martin McDonagh is done in Canada loads.
Yeah.
So that was actually a lot of
billboards.
the plays that I was studying when I was back home as well. So I was quite familiar with that, and it was always sort of seen as really fantastic writing and classics that were an important part of the canon.
What about the member of my family? Did you come across him, Brendan Behan?
No.
Oh yeah, well Brendan wrote in the 50s and 40s and 50s, and mainly it was about his experiences because he got locked up as a juvenile, and because he was a member of the IRA, and then he wrote a play called The Borstal Boy, and then he wrote they tend to be what we would call penitentiary plays, but Brendan was around the same time as Dylan Thomas, and he also seemed to have an awful lot of the same bad habits as Dylan Thomas and died early, and then later in life we discovered he was gay, which probably explains another piece about his writing, but that's a separate matter. With Irish theatre, you're keen on that?
Yeah, it's been... So when I applied to the program, actually, it was last spring, and I didn't find out until July if I was getting in or not. But in June, we have an international festival called Luminato, and there were 2 productions from Ireland that came over. One of them was Riot, which I know is coming back for the Dublin Dance Festival. This is Pop Baby, isn't it?
Yeah,
this is Pop
Panty
Baby.
And all of them, yeah.
And the other was the Swan Lake.
Okay.
And it was so exciting to see. I mean, just seeing the audiences and seeing a piece like Swan Lake that was quite different from the works that we see typically in one of our biggest theaters, in one of our biggest festivals. Everyone was on their feet by the end of it, and half the people were laughing and half the people were crying, and it was just one of those experiences in the theater that I think really promotes how visceral an experience it can be, and how it can bond this group of people that suddenly everyone is leaving and smiling at each other for no particular reason, but knowing they just shared that experience.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, and not a lot of people know this, but one of the reasons why theatre evolved, and I use that term particularly in Dublin, is because everything was censored in this country by the Catholic Church when I was growing up, and their lackeys in the political sphere. But the one area that wasn't was theatre. Now, the way they got around that was they banned priests from going to the theatre. So theatre was this outlet. So, so if you have a look at things like O'Casey, if you have a look at Sing, and all of those playwrights, they were very radical, they were very revolutionary. And that's because theatre was the environment where the audience and the writer, they weren't constrained. So this is why, as what you say, visceral about it, the Irish, and I would say passionate about the Latin Americans. It's where we connect with the psyche, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. To be able to acknowledge these things openly and celebrate them or question them.
Absolutely. Now, and this is the reason, one of the major reasons why we're here. You have a play in the International Dublin Gay Theatre Festival. How did that come about?
So I was, because I'm here doing the Masters, I've been quite focused on that. And then, and then I believe I saw an ad for the theatre festival come up somewhere. And I thought, oh, that looks great. And then there we are.
There we are.
And I noticed that I'd missed the application date. And I went home that night, it was about 10 o'clock at night, and I quickly put together my application because I had an idea for a show.
Was that late last year or early this year?
Early this year.
My word.
Yeah, so it was just, I was only 5 days late.
Okay, no.
But I saw that they would consider late submissions, and so I wrote explaining what my concept was and what I wanted to do and why I was here. And unfortunately, I got an email a couple weeks later from Brian inviting me to be part of the festival. And I think there's something that's really incredible at this festival in particular happening in that it's creating a space for people to just be open and talk about it. And it's not that people who aren't queer or part of the LGBTQ community can't connect with these shows, but I think it's making space for that and then recognizing that there are universal truths in all of these.
Absolutely, Brian, I know Brian for quite some time. I've been involved peripherally with the festival for quite some time, and I have to commit. You cannot praise him too highly. He's a wonderful man, Brian. But no, what I was going to say is that if you only applied this year, and you now have a production going in, and we're not even in May yet. So you've gone from woe to go in such a short period of time. I have to say, Mazel Tov. That's
it's
really well done. How long did it take you to come up with the, as I say, to put down the text?
So I had written the piece before, so it wasn't a sort of overnight
Okay.
sensation.
Don't duck yourself. No, you sat down with a bottle of whiskey, and by the morning
There we go.
we had a script.
What are the words that I can think of off the top of my head right now? No, it was... I mean, I'd been writing it over the course, sort of on and off over the course of a year.
Okay.
So I'd written some bits and then thought about it some more, left it for a period of time, started doing a master's, and then handed in all my papers last week. It's sort of been a bit of a mad rush, but I just feel really grateful to be part of the festival and to be sharing it in this country as well. That's really taking the time to make a space. Which is so fantastic.
I'm not going to give you the question when Lee Marvin won an Oscar as a drunk in a movie called Cat Ballou. An Irish interviewer asked him. He said, "Did you have to do much research?" So I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to put it to you that way. I'm going to say instead, what was the genesis of the idea for the play?
It came about when I was a little bit under the influence of a bottle, and not too much. I would say tipsy at this point, sort of veering the scale. And I was with a woman I was seeing at the time, and I was feeling dramatic for some reason, some night, some kind of an affair, and I just sort of proclaimed. I said, "You know what? I wrote a play about you." Which I hadn't. There was no truth in that.
Never let truth get in the way of a good story. That's the best way.
And she said, "Oh, well, what's it called? A drunk lesbian love affair." And I very quickly scrambled and picked up my notebook and I wrote that name down. So I thought, wow, that's a great play name. And then was going through that notebook and stumbled upon that title a few months later. And then I just started to think about who we are in relationships and what sort of masks we put on and the difference between love and lust and what it is to figure oneself out in a relationship. and outside of a relationship and who we are in those.
Yeah, no, when I saw the title of the play, now, and I'm going to be honest, I think most people are going to hone in on one word, but I saw 4 words there, and I thought, what is the pivotal word here? Is it drunk? Is it love? Is it affair? And the other 90% of people would say it's lesbian. And I think what did you see as the pivotal word in the title?
Definitely love.
Okay, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a comedy, but it's full of heart in the way that it's comedy that we recognize in ourselves as opposed to a ha-ha kind of a funny. It's
True, yeah. Irony even.
Yeah, absolutely. And reflection.
Yeah. And shall we say, the muse, has she seen it?
No, she has not. This will be the world premiere of it, which is quite exciting.
Even better.
But she has read it. Yeah.
And again, I go back to the great Howard Stern, how would I put it, observation, where he says, lesbians equals ratings, and that's why. Who do you think is going to be attracted to this? Because I would hope it will be mainly women who are going to go to it. What do you expect as the audience, or do you think it'll be a balanced audience in that sense?
I do hope it will be a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, I just, from my sort of personal friends, I have a lot of male friends that I know will be coming to support, but I think it's really about. It focuses in on the feelings that women have a lot of the times, and I can only speak from my personal experience with it, but
women have different relationships with each other than they do with men, do they not? Yeah,
and there is a very particular kind of relationship that happens between two women, in that this sort of tenderness and friendship and this idea of, what's the word, sort of this kinship that comes about.
Yeah. But an interesting one as well, and I think one of the great, when I lived in the UK in the 70s and the LGBT scene was just emerging then, I'm showing my age now, one of the great mythologies is that men are promiscuous and women are into relationships. Now, while that may have a certain broad truth in it, the idea that somehow or other that either women aren't promiscuous and men aren't into relationships and they both aren't into physical contact, it's something we're only starting to grasp, I think, now. Does that come through in the work?
It definitely does, yeah. I mean, it's sort of showing the fun of being young and drunk and in love in a way, and I think letting go of and not obeying practicality. I was being a bit cynical when we were outside. I was saying, if I was to write something like that, it'd be the chemsex, because but it's a very, very interesting. I mean, to a certain degree, I mean, Irish people, we had that what I call Catholic boy guilt. So so as a result of that, you only tended to play around either way if alcohol was involved. Is that something that came through your biculturality? Yeah, I mean, personally, it was definitely one of the reasons I felt comfortable in certain times, and then started thinking when not drunk, maybe there's a little bit more to that than just sort of a one night kind of a thing. And I think that part of the reason I did make sure to include the word lesbian in the title was to not be ashamed of that title and not be ashamed of that word, and not try to hide it as anything else other than these things happen to everyone. Yeah. And these experiences should be recognized for what they are, because there is something very different in...
I'm not too sure they do happen to everyone, but they happen to the people we meet. It would have been... It's an interesting one. I wonder how people would have, shall we say, responded if you had have said, put as the title, a drunken queer love affair, which is possibly more politically correct these days. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's get down to the last bit then. Is something that to me is very, very integral to Catholic culture is that certainly when I was growing up, you could do anything you like, provided you felt guilty as hell about it. Does guilt come into it at some stage?
In the show, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the Irish will be able to relate to that, as though it's their own. Yeah, because that was always the thing. If you can do whatever you like and it'll be as much fun, provided you feel as guilty as hell the next day. making sure you think you're going to hell.
Yeah, and what I will say is that the guilt definitely does not come in because of the sexuality, but more the behavior.
relationship
and
is-
it's more about the, oh, I did that again.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that, because that's, I'm a bit older than you, but as I got to a certain stage, I always used to think, I don't care what people think about what I did, it's how I made the other person felt. And that, in other words, you can be as perverse as you like, but provided there is, what I always say is, provided there's consent and privacy, and that's exactly it. Let's have a look at the important details, Thalia.
Yes.
Tell us, when is it on, where is it on, and how long does it go on for?
Well, we are running from May 6th to 11th at the Pierce Centre in Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah.
Here we are.
That's, yeah.
International Dublin Gay Theatre Festival. And we're actually running alongside a show called Cello by Leslie and Riley. It's a beautiful piece. So I think the two combined in the one evening of theatre will be really...
Yeah. And you've also got a matinee on the Saturday, is that correct?
We do, yes. We have a matinee on both the Monday and the Saturday at 4 o'clock, and then the rest of the evenings we have 9 o'clock shows every night.
Yeah. It's quite a small venue. I've been to a couple of performances or productions over the years at the Gay Theatre Festival. Any idea what it holds?
I believe it's about 40 to 60.
It'll be about that,
40
yeah. I was
60,
about to go
yeah.
for
So
50.
get your tickets soon.
Yeah, so get your tickets. That's what I'm saying. If you do plan on going, it's probably a good idea to book in advance. Thalia, it has been a delight. We're not going drinking, and I'm not a lesbian, So, but look, Thalia, the play is called A Drunken Lesbian Affair. It's on the Pierce Centre, is what I call it. They call it the Ireland Institute. It's the old home of Padraig Pearse, I gather. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It'll be starting next Monday at 9 p.m.
Yes.
Which is the
Monday
bank...
at 4 p.m.
Oh, it's Monday at 4
Yes,
p.m.
Monday
Okay,
at 4 p.m. and
that's
then 9 p.m.
That's the bank holiday, or the public holiday. We call the best of traditions. Break a leg.
Thank you.
It has been a delight talking to you, Thalia.
Thanks for having me in.
What a performance tonight. Should I react or turn off the light? Looks like you're picking a fight in a blurring wrong and right. How your mood changes. You're a devil, now an angel. Solemnly subtle, solemn and silent.